You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, well, hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
And as usual, we're your hosts for the show. So we thought, you know what? It's Friday night at 11 p.m. What a better thing to do than to look at the 30 most powerful Jedi. Because, top 5 list, top 10 list, nah, that's not enough. We're going top 30 at 11 p.m. Eastern on a Friday night. But, of course, I should say, though, that first of all, this is not our list. This is Screenrant's list, so this isn't one of those, like, we're each going to share, our top 30 or something like that. That's why you want to put in the title. I really want to make this clear. This is sort of like what you would do with your friends or whatever, where, you see something and you're like, oh, you just start discussing it or whatever. And so we thought, okay, let's take this top 30 most powerful Jedi list that Screenrant.com came up with. Let's break it down and talk about it a little bit. But really, what we're working up to, and that's the reason why we're probably not going to spend a whole lot of time on most of these people, because how do I put this without giving it away? I'll probably reiterate this, obviously, toward the end of the show after we're done with the countdown. But the idea behind this is that we're going to explore basically a couple of the Jedi that appear at the top of this list, and we're going to continue and get more in depth on the discussion on Monday's show. So think of tonight as more of a precursor to Monday's show, and that's really what this whole thing is all about for now. So that's the reason why we're probably not going to be spending, we're not going to sit there and have a bunch of conversations, although knowing us, we probably will at some point. But the idea is we're probably going to get through this list fairly quickly. And then, of course, once we get toward the top, you'll basically see where we're going. And it's great. We got Ronaldo back with us, which is nice.
Hey,
long
time no see.
I know, it's been a minute. And, of course, Dragonfly is usually with us. So, yeah. So the idea was, now you found this list, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you did. You did. And it's really interesting, too, because I think we did something similar with one of our top 5 or top 10s. I think we did like top 5 or 10 favorite Jedi. Because I remember if you're a member only, you actually get to see the Sith Lord list. We did do a countdown of Sith Lords, but you actually have to be a member in our buymeacoffee.com program. You sign up, you become a member, you get access to that show. But this is something I remember we pointed this out during that list too, that this is actually ranking the most powerful Jedi. And one of the things that really caught my attention, and of course, because you found this, I'll turn it over to you so you could tell everybody basically what drew you to this, how you found it, and all that. But what really struck, I guess, it really struck a nerve with me in a way. But it was something that I'd always wanted to see, is they actually attempted to rank them. This isn't about, like, oh, this is our favorites or anything like that. No, this is like the most powerful Jedi, and it's ranked, which means this is a weighted list. Which means, number 10 is actually more powerful than number 30. And it's going to be interesting as we all discuss this. Do we agree with this? And actually, that's going to be part of the discussion for Monday as well, focusing on a couple of entries in this list. But yeah, I thought that it was really cool that they actually weighted this list.
Yeah, I mean, that's a hard thing to do, honestly, because you really have to kind of go in depth with these characters, and you really have to kind of try to situate them, especially the closer you get to the top, which is, like you said, leading up to Monday. It's kind of a thing, because on one hand, I'll just put this out there: Anakin. Some people would agree that Anakin is where he should be, and then some people would agree that he's not. And once again, that's just a snippet of what we could talk about on Monday, but um, and that's without even really truly giving that away. But just as a talking point, um, yeah, the gravity of this is kind of monumental in the sense of trying to truly rank some of these Jedi, and especially, you know, I could see it being difficult for the lesser known, and even it's complicated for the more known Jedi because
Yeah.
the higher up you get, now you have to really start like looking at the measurables ever more so closely because you have incremental differences. Like some may be better as a swordsman, but someone may be more powerful in the force. You know, there's so how do you really truly edge that out? But then when you start looking at the lesser Jedi that are lesser known and less empowered, there's usually not a whole lot of info on them. So you really have to try to figure out like, you know, the details in order to truly rank them appropriately. So kudos to Screenrant for even just taking that on.
Yeah, this is one of those things that, I don't know. And you run across some of the people on this list. You're like, who? I don't. Who is this? I don't even know who this is, right? So I mean, that's one of the reasons why for our list I kept it down to like favorite, kept it to 5. Because I mean, I remember when
Right.
we did the bounty hunter list and it was like top 10. I'm sitting there like, man, can I even name 10 bounty hunters?
Right.
Much less. Well, I guess they're all my favorite then. So I mean, it's just one of those things. So Dragonfly asks, is the list canon and EU characters? Yes. It does contain both. Again, I do want to stress, though, this is not our list. All right. So it's not Eric and Daryl ranking the
Mhm.
30 most powerful Jedi. This is basically Screen Rant's list, and we're pretty much presenting it to you guys. I mean, you can go back. I might, if I remember to do this, I might actually go back into the or not the comment section, but the description
Description.
and actually put the link to the article in it if you guys want to check it out for yourselves and read about it. Because, there's like, they list, number 28, and then they have a little blurb about them. But yeah, it does contain both. And that's actually what makes it interesting. So I guess without further ado, we could probably just get into this thing. So at number 30, they have Barriss Offee. And of course, I'm trying to remember. She was technically in the movies, right? I think she might have been in
Yes.
the like the Geonosis scene or something like that. I mean, she didn't have any speaking roles that I remember.
Possibly. Yeah, possibly. Her master definitely was.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
yeah, Luminara. That's her
yeah.
master, right? Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. She was in there, and of course, some of the other ones like Shakti and all them. We've seen some. That
Mhm.
was a cool thing about the prequels, I think, is that you had all these, like almost like less. I don't want to say lesser, but
You could say
yeah,
lesser known.
lesser known. That's a good one. I mean, if I remember correctly, Barriss really made more of an appearance in the Clone Wars animated series
Mhm.
than the actual thing, since she had some story arc or something.
It was actually and it was a big story arc, quite frankly, because um, Anakin and Luminara had basically sent their Padawans to kind of go tackle this mission together for them to build a bond. So ended up being Ahsoka and Barriss, and there was a whole setup thing where eventually Barriss ended up framing Ahsoka. You
That's
know,
right. Yeah, this is all part of that
Mhm.
whole Ahsoka thing, and then of course Asajj comes in later and helps her out.
well,
Yeah,
yeah, because it was like there's two times that Ahsoka was framed.
right.
One was the Barriss Offee one, and then she eventually got figured out that it was Barriss who set her up, basically,
Mm-hmm.
um, and they kind of got trapped in that underground mine or something like that, and they
Yep.
kind of had to find their way
Yep.
out. And I remember that's what Anakin was kind of freaking out because he's like, Ahsoka's my responsibility. And Luminara's like, well, if we train them the way that they're supposed to, they will find their way back to us. And that was kind of like a lesson for Anakin as well as, the the Padawan. So, yeah, but Barris Offee, she was cool in it, and they were kind of a cool little team when they were on the same side with, I mean, however, being with Ahsoka. So, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I hate when that happens, right? But yeah, I mean, and again, and it's funny because with some of these lesser known characters, especially, it's really hard to quantify where they would fall in this list sometimes, I think, you know?
yeah. I think Barris. The reason why Barris is this low is because I think after the whole situation with Ahsoka, she was kicked out of the order, and um, of course, Luminara didn't want anything to do with her after that. So I think because she never really got any more official training, she kind of, falls to the bottom of the well in that regard.
Well, and the other thing too is that usually what ends up happening is whenever a Jedi can fall to the dark side or something, they're, it's almost like they can't resist the what do you call it, like the evil or something or the darkness. So I think sometimes they do. I mean, obviously, because see the thing you got to look at it right, because you have something like Count Dooku, let's just say. Now he was a Jedi, he fell to the darkness, but then he became a powerful Sith Lord. So it's almost like once you adopt that whole dark side dogma, if you will, then you start to rise in power in the dark side, but you're still weakened as a Jedi, which I find really interesting. And I think with Barris, it's much the same thing. It was almost like she wasn't as powerful that way. Now Ronaldo basically comes in, he says, I think it was a bold decision to make her go evil. And yeah, that was something that I didn't see coming. I remember watching this and
Yeah.
thinking to myself, like, wow, really? I didn't see that one coming. All right, well, let's go to number 29 then. I mean, we got to get through these. I just said we're not going to spend a whole lot of time, and we're
Oh
spending like
no.
5 minutes on each one. This thing's going to be a 5-hour podcast. So at number 29, we actually have Jocasta Nu, and this is really fascinating to me too, because again, there is in the man, I can't remember if it was a War of the Bounty Hunter or because they did this whole crossover thing that actually went across all the comics in the whole Star Wars canon. So this could have been the Darth Vader comic series, but Jocasta Nu actually, they found her. She didn't die or whatever, and she went up against him, and she was holding her own against him for quite some time. I mean, she's way more powerful than what people give her credit for, but, still number 29.
Right. Yeah, I mean, being the librarian and all, I mean, you think she would have, she's acquired a mass amount of knowledge, that's her position in the Jedi Order is basically the custodian of all the archives and whatnot. So
Well, and Palpatine
she's
feared
she's
that was the big, because I remember that sort of came out in the comics too, is that, during this time period, Palpatine greatly feared her for that reason, because you just had like this crazy wealth of knowledge.
hmm and of course, what's up?
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, she had a crazy, wealth of knowledge, and with her being seasoned, we don't know how long she started. I'm assuming that she started her Jedi, training, much like the rest of the kids, and as a little one. So you got to think about it. Like she's pretty up in age, I mean, in here. So think of all the things that she's seen in her experiences and the Jedi she's met and lost, and um, information that's just coming to her. Uh, into her area. She's quite the holocron in a way. She's like a
Yeah,
living holocron.
pretty much.
And
Pretty much.
on a multitude of different things, not just the Jedi arts, but planets and um doctrine and philosophies and all types of stuff. And so yeah, I can see why she would be a big threat to the Emperor.
Yeah, and I mean, again, you're not going to put her at like number 11 or something, right? I mean, so
Right.
this actually does make sense. Now, Ronaldo's got a couple of thoughts on this as well. He says, I think the canon version is stronger than the EU version. And in the Revenge of the Sith game, she gets killed easily by Anakin. which is really interesting because, again, she really goes toe-to-toe with him in the recent comic series. So it was... Sometimes I think what they do is they actually will take these characters and whatever fits their story, that's what they'll put. And that's why I say it's really hard to quantify their true power. Because if you think about it, you have different sources that'll actually set a character like her at a different power level. So it's like, well, how do you really... I mean, I guess the games aren't really canon, so it doesn't matter, but I just think that that's interesting. And that's why, again, we'll probably say this a lot tonight, but I really give Screenrant a lot of credit for putting this list together, especially because, people like us are going to go in and dissect it and possibly tear it apart. All right, so now number 28. Number 28, we have our first High Republic character that comes into play, Vernestra Rowe. And I'm not 100% familiar with her because...
Me either. I don't have a whole lot of knowledge on
Yeah, the books that I've read in the High Republic series, she wasn't really featured at all, really. So let me see, because I do have some... let's see. So she modified her lightsaber into a light whip in response to its guidance, which is interesting. So she's battled Nile pirates. She's battled the Drengir. Yeah, and I guess... So Screenrant's basically saying, look, she would have actually been maybe higher on the list, except that so far the High Republic Phase 1 has only showed the beginning of her journey.
Not to mention, I don't think she ran across any Sith Lords either. So I mean,
no, but here's something fascinating. So Rebecca Henderson has been cast as her in The Acolyte. So this is the first time that we're actually seeing, and that's probably why, in this picture you're seeing a live action actress and also a depiction in more of a drawing style. So that's pretty cool, actually, that they're really starting to cross over, because remember, we were wondering, being that The Acolyte takes place toward the end of the High Republic, it's like, well, how much crossover are we going to see? Are we going to see somebody like Avar Chris or, any of these people, right? Skier or whatever, come into play? So it's kind of interesting. Okay, Ronaldo says, I think I remember the book she was on, but I never read it. Well, I'll tell you, if she's in The Acolyte, I might be tempted to try to seek out some more stuff from her, but let's move on, shall we? Number 27, we got Aayla Secura. Now, of course, we remember this scene. This is probably one of the most tragic and brutal, I might add. This was pretty dark. I mean, when you stop and think about it, this is extremely dark for Star Wars, especially.
Man. I mean, they just gunned her down, man.
Gunned her down. I mean, it's just like a massacre.
Cold blood, man. It's just, wow. Yeah, I mean, and I guess honestly, in those situations too, you can kind of see why some of these people aren't as powerful, because as you recall in Revenge of the Sith, some of the Jedi could actually sense there was a betrayal.
Yeah.
It's just that, like, for example, Ki-Adi-Mundi felt it, but it almost like, and he reacted to it, but he couldn't react fast enough.
Well, and he couldn't quite quantify it, I think, was part of the problem.
Yeah, he was kind of like...
Yeah, like he knew something was up.
Like,
yeah, but...
Like, really? And then he was like, well, I guess so. And then, he kind of went on the defensive. But Aayla didn't even see it coming. She was just kind of like... Well, maybe she did, but it was extremely way too late. Like, as soon as she realized it, they were blasting her already.
Well, that was the thing. I mean, if you remember, she was basically just going, and all of a sudden, it's just like, I don't know where these... I mean, because the Jedi, look, they're still mortal beings, right? They're not, godlike or anything like that. They just have some really, supernatural type powers.
Senses, yeah.
Exactly. So, I mean, they're still at the mercy. I mean, it's almost like you said, by the time that it would have registered to her in the Force, she just would have been like, all right, pretty
Yep.
much cannon fodder at that point. But her whole thing was more of a martial arts type of thing anyway. So I could see why she's a little bit lower on this list because, like I said, her thing is a little bit more hand-to-hand combat. On some of the
Yeah.
things that she has been featured in or whatever, you don't really see um, a lot. But the problem is that I think that she's an example. I again, I'm not 100% sure because it's been a minute, but I'm pretty sure that this is a case where she was in the EU quite a bit and she had done some stuff. But then, of course, when Disney said, oh, nope, that's Legends, here's the new canon, now there's not a whole lot. And so when you get to something like that, it's going to be really tough to rank these people because you're not really sure. Well, it's
Mhm.
like, okay, you might end up with a Jedi, for instance, who was like maybe like number 13 or whatever. But that's because all the EU stuff was there. And then once it was decanonized pretty much, even though it was never technically canon. I mean, let's be honest. But
Mhm.
it was part of the lore though. And it was an acceptable part of really encompassing the entire character. So you can basically rank and say, okay, in this book and that comic and whatever. But once that was all taken away, well, now you can only look at the canonized material that she was in, which, what would that even be? Like just Attack of the Clones, maybe, and Revenge of the Sith? I mean, she might be
Yeah.
in some novels. I'm not sure. Because again, I've gotten really behind in reading the novels. All right. So next up, we have, and this is probably going to be one of the first ones where there might be a little bit of contention on where this character falls in the list. Because again, up until now, they've been either lesser known or characters that I don't think anybody's really fighting, going, well, Jocasta Nu should actually be a little. I don't think anybody's doing that. But our number 26, though, well, not our number 26, Screenrant's number 26, though, is Ezra Bridger. And so with Ezra Bridger,
Mm.
this is where it gets a little bit difficult, I think. Again, I am glad that they resisted the temptation of him being more known to, put him higher up in the list. And I don't know. I'm actually personally, I mean, I'm interested in your thoughts, but I'm okay with where he is actually on this list,
Oh yeah, totally.
you know?
I don't want them. I mean, as far as what I've seen, even thus far in the Ahsoka series, I still would put him here, especially now. You know, um, sure he's grown, sure he got powerful, and that's the thing. So my biggest question would be, especially for Screen Rant, like what is the criteria for powerful? Like what are you basing your criteria on?
Mhm.
And that's an element that we don't have going into this list. So, we can't really speculate, I mean we can only speculate what that could be. But Ezra, yes, he was, he definitely had some force abilities that were unique to him. Not just him, but he's one of the few people that we've seen communicate with animals in such a way. Sure we've seen Anakin do it. Um, and it's once again, it's one of those abilities that not everyone learns, and that's one of the things about it's almost like kind of being a doctor in a way, when you're going through the Jedi training, it's like you kind of get the basics of the Force and understand certain things, but then you start to branch off into your specialties, where it's like, okay, I'm more of a swordsman, or I'm more of a history buff or historical person, and I'm more of a meditator, or I'm more of a Force user in the sense of, for battle, or I'm more of a warrior as opposed to a true peacekeeper, where I might be focused on force healing and looking into the future and reading dreams and something like that. Like that's a
Mhm.
whole discipline unto itself versus, being able to pick up, a starship or something and chuck it across a canyon or something. Like, that's those are
Right.
two different in some ways there are two different disciplines. When
Well,
it comes to
it's more of a warlike versus more of a practical use. A lot of these
yeah.
characters have more of a practical use of the Force, not so much an offensive
Hmm.
type, thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and
So
again,
even with Ezra, in this sense, like, okay, we know he's able to talk to different life forms like the, Lothwolf or the space whales or um, and of course he's able to do basic things like, the basic run of the mill Jedi tricks of, telekinesis and being able to fight with a lightsaber and whatnot. But, I'm good
well,
with where Ezra is.
and again, and I'm good with where he is, but there's just one little addendum, if you will, that I need to put on this because I'm good with where he is if you take the overall thing. But one of the things that really also I think makes it difficult to rank these characters is the fact that, again, you had that discrepancy. When we see him or leave him in the Rebels series, he seems
Hmm.
a lot more powerful than he was when we pick him up in Ahsoka. There's definitely a discrepancy there. Like the animated Ezra
Well,
is more powerful, in other words.
yeah, and I think just because in ability of things that we've seen, simply because we've seen him with, at that time he was dealing with a lightsaber. At this time, we're not seeing him. We haven't seen him really wield a lightsaber yet.
Oh, that's true.
Um, so that's kind of a thing. Also, I think with Ezra, of course, he's grown in power, but he's still. I don't know if you would consider him a Jedi Knight though. Like, I think he's still an advanced Padawan. Like, I think he's more
Or
like
whatever.
how Obi-Wan was like in Phantom Menace. That's why I probably will rank Ezra, like, as far as power level.
Yeah.
And I think that's where a Screen Rant is probably giving him too, is that he's probably more along those lines, but he's not exactly ready for he might be ready for the trials, but I wouldn't put him at, how Obi-Wan was in Attack of the Clones. I wouldn't put him at that level. So I think the Ezra being where he is because he stopped being taught. Kanan was dead.
Hmm.
Ahsoka was kind of no longer around to really continue his training. So whatever he learned, he kind of just picked it up on his own. But I think if he actually had a master and someone who could teach him more, then he probably would have been a lot farther, and which means he would have been a lot higher.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. So I'm okay with that. At number 25, we have another High Republic character. This is Stellan uh, Gios or Gaios. Probably Gaios. I never knew because this is like strictly books, right? We haven't had any of these
Hmm.
guys. Nobody's said their name. I mean, unless you get the audio book. This one I do remember reading. So I remember he ended up sacrificing his life for oh, I can't remember her name, but on the Starlight Beacon, it was like a Nile attack or something. I don't remember which. I don't think it was Light of the Jedi, but it was one of those earlier books. I remember reading it. So he's another guy. Let me see if there's anything. 'Cause I do have I actually have the article up, so I can reference stuff here and there. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Tragically sacrificed to save others. Starlight Beacon. His true power has seldom been displayed, but he kept remarkable company. Yeah, he was working alongside of our Chris and Elzar Man. So basically, this is one of those. What Screen Rant was coming from is like, look, he was hanging around some pretty powerful people, so he's probably pretty powerful. But again, there's not a whole lot you can go on with this stuff, right? And this is going to be one of the problems when you start getting into these lesser known characters is there's less available. There's less material, less source material available to truly rank them. You would almost need to consult some sort like Lucasfilm would have to do what they used to do, where they basically come out with these encyclopedia of characters type of a thing, and they give you the official ranking or something like that.
Hmm.
But for an outside source to try to rank all these characters is very difficult because how do you even do that? Like with this guy, what's he done, right? So, I mean, not to disparage the guy, I'm sure he's cool. And I remember his character was cool from what I read, but yeah, it's just, again, it's another one I'm totally fine with.
Yeah, I really don't have much info on him aside from the blurb that I got, so I'm just gonna go with that.
Yeah, well, I mean, and that's the
um,
problem because even though I've probably read a couple of more books and maybe comics that you have in the High Republic, it's not much. Both of us are pretty much in the same spot in the High Republic, just,
yeah,
it's not that I don't like it. It's all a timing thing. I mean, maybe I'll start to do
yes, yeah,
the Audible
exactly.
stuff because, I subscribe to Audible now and it's actually pretty cool. I mean, I've been doing it for, I don't know, probably a year or whatever, and it is a good way because it's a quicker way to read books. And sometimes, depending on how they're read, now most of it's been biographies or whatever, but yeah, it's pretty cool. Okay, number 24, Depa Balaba, I guess is how you say
Hmm.
this.
Yep.
Now I want to say, this almost looks like something from Visions. That's
It
that's what it
does.
reminded me of instantly. Now, let's see. I'm gonna have
Depa was
to
cool. Yeah,
Depa.
Depa was actually this Kanan Jarrus' master.
Yeah, that's what it was. I knew because it looked familiar.
Yeah, we saw the flashback scene like in the Bad Batch when she sacrificed her life for Kanan. Um,
That's right. Okay, that's
remember?
what it
Yeah.
was. Yeah.
But she was also the Padawan of Mace Windu,
Yep.
if
It
I'm not
says that
mistaken.
here now
Yeah.
that I'm reading the
Okay.
article. Yep.
Yeah. And he
And of
taught
course,
her, his special Vapad, force,
mm-hmm.
I mean, lightsaber techniques and stuff. So she was actually pretty powerful, and she was, a very good warrior, great swordswoman. Um, so I'm cool. I mean, I'm so fortunate we didn't get to see more of her because I think she's actually more interesting just because she's a Padawan of Mace, and I would just love to see what that would have been like, and also to see her actually, because you know how Mace could be so stern. So I wanted to know if she adopted that with Kanan, or was she a little bit more motherly in a way towards Kanan?
Well, that's true because even in Kanan's case, right? Basically, where we meet him in canon is A New Dawn, which was the very first newer canon Star Wars book. It was the first Star Wars book in the Disney canon. And so, of course, we're picking up with Kanan's story after the Order 66. He's in hiding and all this other stuff. And then, of course, he meets Ezra and the crew of the Ghost, and he more or less adopts his Jedi Knight status, and even though really he's a Padawan, and he's teaching
Mhm.
a Padawan that knows less. So you're right. It would be interesting to actually see in context what it was like when Kanan was a Padawan under Depa. And then
Mhm.
maybe, it's almost like you use Depa as a central character and you have a little bit of Mace training her and, then see what she actually passes on to Kanan. I mean, there's just like a lot of probably untapped stories there that could be cool. And to that end, Ronaldo says that she died pretty fast in both the Bad Batch and the comics. So I guess that means there's not a whole lot of hope there of expanding that storyline. But you never know.
Hopefully, we get that like in Tales of the Jedi or something. That would
Well,
actually be
we
cool.
we that would actually be a perfect one. Although I heard that just from what I've seen on some YouTube videos that Tales of the Jedi is going to focus on Palpatine and Sifo Dyas
Ooh.
and yeah, some stuff like that. So I mean, that should be pretty cool too, actually. Yeah, Tales of the Jedi would be the appropriate spot for that. Or, again, novels, comics, games. All right, number 23. We got Sacy Tin. This guy, he was another one. He's one of those guys where you know him, but he's not really featured, I guess would be the word for it.
Yeah, you've seen him a lot, like sitting at the council, and he was actually one of the ones who went up against Palpatine, and he got wiped out, of course, quickly. And he's actually known as one of the better swordsmen. So once again, it's kind of like,
yeah, one of the better swordsmen. It's like, oh, after the Palpatine thing, yeah, number 23.
Yeah. And that's what I'm saying. Is just like Palpatine made everybody. I mean, that's the thing about Palpatine. He made all those Jedi like masters look like kids.
Yeah, well, it says here, yeah, it was one of the best lightsaber swordsmen among the Jedi, the prequel era, possibly using his telepathic abilities to sense an enemy's intentions before they struck. They weren't working that day. But it says that may explain why he was so easily defeated by Sidious when he proved unable to anticipate the Dark Lord. Yeah, you think?
Yeah, because he was blocking,
yeah, right.
Blocking the Force.
So he's probably like, cool, all right, we're here to arrest a senator. And all of a sudden it's like, whoa.
Whoa.
It's like doing this like tornado flip or something over his desk. And,
crazy.
I mean, that's, that would be a tough thing to overcome. All right, number 22, we got Yaddle. And of course, it's cool because this is from the Tales of the Jedi, this little depiction here. And again, if I remember correctly, before this, the only time we saw her was in the Phantom Menace council scenes, right?
Yeah, it's just sitting in the chair. Chair.
Yep. Just pretty much taking up space and being scenery. But once we got into the Tales of the Jedi, and this is why it's a good point, why you say, like, this would be good to explore, like, Depa or something. Because they completely changed Yaddle's story, at least in the consciousness of the fans, from just basically being scenery to having this explosive, cool, just important, vital role in the whole story. And it just goes to show you that all you have to do, if you just tell some good stories and, because who cares about Yaddle? Really? It wasn't until this that we did.
I think that, and I think that's, and that's, if they wanted to actually go, man, like it's almost like unfortunate. Well, I'm gonna say it's unfortunate because they still could do it. They're doing it in Tales of the Jedi, but I think it would be cool is even if they did like another animated series, but they would just feature more stories of other lesser known Jedi that we know of, like a Shakti, like Depa, like Yaddle, and others like that, Jocasta Nu, and just see how and just expand their stories. And it could be all around the events that we already know that took place, but it's like you can still tell a wealth of stories to kind of illuminate them. So I think the Tales of the Jedi series, that's a perfect format to do that. I would just love for the stories to actually be longer, like just make them like an hour show.
Well, and again, going along with that, that's the perfect example, right? Because this is a way that you can balance things. And I've often said this myself, where people are like, oh, we're so sick. Oh, yeah, great. Another thing that takes place between episodes 3 and 4, whatever. And I get it, but that's because most of what we're seeing is the hierarchy characters. It's like, like you said, there's so many stories that you can tell in between the episodes. I mean, look at the War of the Bounty Hunters comic. That takes place in between 5 and 6. And there's all kinds of stuff going on in there. And so you can definitely mine that more, which of course the marketing department would love because it's still part of the eras where everybody's familiar. You're not going too outside of the familiar but yet you're
Mhm.
introducing something new, and there's no reason in the world why they can't do that. But for some reason, they just choose not to or whatever. I mean, even in the case of Yaddle, she is there during the High Republic too, so they could easily feature her in some High Republic stuff and even the Acolyte if they want, because a lot of times people forget it's real easy to do because there's not much out there. But the Acolyte does take place at the tail end of the High Republic, so they could
Mhm.
easily do some stuff there, and I think that would be a smart move personally. All right, number 21. Number 21 is a person that we've been talking about periodically through the 20s here, and that's Mr. Kanan Jarrus.
Yeah. Good old Kanan. I mean, Kanan was another cool one. We saw his growth and development through through Rebels, and how he kind of started off as this kind of unsure Padawan, um, who really didn't want to try to train Ezra, but then he kind of figured like, hey, I needed guidance just like he did at one point, and who else is there's no one else around to do it really. So at least let me give him some stuff that's going to help him, and hopefully he can discover, we can discover things together. And I thought that was cool too, is that they kind of took on the task of discovering the Force and understanding things, and that made him a better Jedi as well. And
Hmm.
then ultimately, he got some insight from the Bendu, and then when eventually with him losing his sight, he became even more powerful because now he had to fully rely on the Force all the time just to lead him where he's supposed to be going everywhere. Just in everyday life, just being able to walk around, he needed the Force to kind of guide him. And so
Yeah.
that ultimately made him a more powerful Jedi. And of course, this scene right here was, we talked about this before, like one of the most heartbreaking yet touching scenes is him really using the extent of his Force ability to hold off that, make a barrier to hold off that blast, which is something Grogu does in The Mandalorian season 3. Um, and he was so in tune with the Force that it allowed him to see again, which was really cool. At least until he, bit the dust. But
Yeah, it was
um,
more successful for Grogu.
yeah, exactly. but Kanan, I always did love Kanan. I always loved his he kind of had that whole cool, laid back um, personality, but he would be tough on Ezra every now and again. But he was, just kind of like a big brother, and that's always the vibe I got from Kanan.
Well, and not only that, I mean, one of the things, you're right. I mean, towards the end, after the blindness and everything, it changed everything about him. And actually, he almost became sort of like the Star Wars version of Daredevil at that point because he was able to
Right.
fight and all this other stuff. But one of the other points that, before we move on, that I just want to bring up about Kanan is that if you're at all a fan of this character, or just really good storytelling, actually, or perhaps maybe more canon and world building, you really owe it to yourself to read the New Dawn novel, um, because there's a lot in there, and it also, oh man, I always forget the name of this guy, like Mr. Virillion or something like that, or I can't remember his name, but he was actually a really cool villain. There's just so much in the New Dawn book, and it really explores Kanan. It's pretty much the entry into the whole Star Wars universe for that character. That's where we're picking up his story. And it just sheds a lot of light on it. So, absolutely. All right. So, now we're about to enter the top 20.
Top
And of
20.
course, this is basically another character that we've referenced off and on. And that's
Mm.
Luminara, you know?
Yeah.
I mean,
Lunar and Dooley.
now,
Yes.
this is somebody that we actually have seen a little bit on both. I mean, she was in the movies a little bit, but then she was definitely in the animated series a
Yeah.
lot. And this is another one, I've always been intrigued by what I would call almost like these lesser featured Jedi female characters, because
Yeah,
there's a similarity, but they're very, very cool, and I can't help but think that there's more there that, you know what I mean?
she's always just mystified me, and I've always been drawn to Luminara on her and Barris because
Yeah.
mean, they have such a cool look, number 1,
Mhm.
and then 2, like, um, I don't know, there's you know what it is? She kinda reminds me just looking at her, she reminds me of Guinan
I was
from
just
Star
about
Trek.
to say that, man. I was like, "Okay, when he finishes his
Like,
point, I gotta point out the similarity between Guinan," and there's a little bit of a, you
yeah.
know, of a
Yeah, and the way
similarity
she
there.
kinda the way she kinda conducts things, and she's very almost I mean, she's a Jedi, but she's even more mystical in some ways than others. Just the way she talks and how she, um but she's very stern, though. She's
Mhm.
very, like, no nonsense almost, and you know, you can tell that, Barris had to kinda get that, um she kinda had to unlearn a little bit of that dealing with Ahsoka because Anakin kinda lets Ahsoka be Ahsoka and kinda have a loose hand in a way, much like how he is, within respect to certain boundaries, but
Right.
Luminara and Barris are more like, "No, we're by the book,"
Yep.
to the letter, basically, and however, at the same time, like, there's a certain, like, regalness, a certain wisdom, a certain, like queen like vibe that you get from Luminar, and I really just would love to see more of that.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, she's been featured in some books, a few of the comics, and again, you just can't help but think that with what has been revealed to us with these characters through those medium, it's like there's more to these people. I want to see more of this. This is more interesting to me. You don't have to invent, some pseudo male, super female character. You have them already. That's the thing that's interesting. And Lucas is the one that put these people there. Just
Hmm.
explore those. And there's just so many characters like Luminara that you're just like, man, I just can't help but think that there's more story there to tell. So hopefully that's in the works because again, like you said, the Tales of the Jedi series, it's a perfect medium to do it. And it's almost like the book from a certain point of view that I would love to read. There's a lot of really great stories in that too. Basically, like it's almost like a Lion King 1.5 kind of thing. All right, so number
Hmm.
19. 19 is Kiadi Mundi. He's a guy that I've always loved this guy. There's just
Yeah, I was to say it's one of their favorites.
yeah, I don't know, he just has this real he's stern, but he's really laid back and sort of casual. And actually, he's been featured in a lot of the novels as well. He's another guy. And he's every bit as cool in the novels as what you feel he is. Because again, he doesn't really have a huge role in the movies. He has a couple of lines of dialogue, so he's a little bit more than a background character, but not much.
Yeah, Mundy is really cool. His look has always been interesting and cool. He reminds me of those old Chinese
Yep.
movies where you have the
Yeah.
old master
Yep.
and he's got the Fu Manchu, he's got the big bushy eyebrows and everything like that. Like that's kind of who he reminds me of, and he has that type of wisdom, and even that quiet disposition about him.
Yeah, and I guess this thing's saying that there's a couple of things. Uh, because he practiced Makashi, he's one of the few that could have successfully beat Dooku, and his reflexes allowed him to deflect several blaster shots when, of course, he was unexpectedly attacked by the clone troopers in Episode 3. So, I mean, he's not just some older master that doesn't get in the action and is just kind of a teacher only. I mean, this guy can still bring
Yeah,
it in
get
battle.
he used to get in the ring. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it's one of those things where you're like, okay, cool. I can respect this. I mean, to bring it into the Rocky thing, since we're continuing our tribute to Carl Weathers here. He's more Rocky than Mickey.
Right.
I mean, Mick couldn't really get in the ring and start boxing, but he was like a brilliant coach for
Trainer.
boxing. Yeah,
Yeah.
brilliant
Yeah.
trainer. Rocky, on the other hand, could train you and then demonstrate it.
Yeah.
He could jump in the ring with you and be like, watch. And that's where Kiadi Mundi is to me. All right, so number 18. Number 18, we got Elzar Mann. Like I said, he's another one of those guys. It's funny because the way he is here, it's almost like it's like one of those like 1930s, comic strips like Dick Tracy or something.
I was just about to say, like, man, he looks like Dick Tracy or something.
He does.
Like he's like a flat top or something.
Yeah, right. Like, okay, I can, you know what? We'll go with this. So let me see, because again, I read a book or two where he was mentioned. I don't really remember him doing as much. They say that he's going to be more central in Phase 3. I don't think I've read any of the Phase 2 books, but he's a controversial figure, apparently. He had a unique relationship with the Force that often granted him insight others did not possess. Unfortunately, for all his power, he lacked wisdom, received a vision for the Force about a pirate attack on Valos Republic Fair, and then arrogantly assumed his mere presence had averted it. So again, sure, number 18, okay. It's like, all right. Now Ronaldo actually chats in on this one. Because Ronaldo's the one, for anybody that doesn't realize. Well, of course, he's also one of our original viewers, and we always have a soft spot in our heart for Ronaldo and love his insight. Because a lot of times Ronaldo will actually get us out of whenever we're trying to fight for something, we can't remember something, he always chats it in. But he also has read a lot of the High Republic stuff, or at least more than we have. And he basically says, I like this guy, but his design looks so generic. Exactly. It's like, he just, I don't know, like something like Ben Affleck would play him or something. It's, I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. He definitely looks
It's just like they gave up. They were just basically like,
oh,
I
he
don't
looks
know.
like he's from like the old he looks like he's from Detective Comics or something like
Right.
that. Like
Exactly.
Batman or something.
Yep.
Like
He's, like I said, he's like one of those old time detectives. And I think they just were kind of like, okay, you know what? Let's just put one of those guys in there. All right, number 17. 17 is Ahsoka Tano. And again, this might be one of those spots where there might be some people that go, I think she should be higher than this. But I don't know.
yeah, I think I want to put her higher, honestly. I mean, I kind of get it, but at the same time, I think she should be higher considering that she went up against Vader. I mean, granted,
Yeah,
the
well,
first
that's
time,
my
I mean,
thing.
she kind of lost, but
She survived.
she survived. And
But then again, though, let me point this out, though. Kira went up against Vader, too, and survived. And she's not even a Jedi. So there is that.
was Vader just getting used to the suit or something? Or?
No. This is one of those in between episodes 5 and 6 thing. Vader was fully himself.
Oh, wow.
And I mean, it's just Kira's a really good combatant. I mean, because again, of course, Vader would have eventually have vanquished her, and a certain part of him was impressed, so he didn't really want to kill her right away. But she did give him a good fight. So you can't always use the X character went up against Vader thing, because there's actually a lot. But where I would go is, okay, she's Anakin's Padawan. When you look at some of the people who are ranked higher than her, I'm like, I don't know, man. I think I've seen more from her than some of these other people,
Yeah, especially her growth and the things that she's seen in Ben and people she's with all the time. Not only is she with Anakin, but she's with Obi-Wan all the time. And quite frankly, those are like the two higher, more powerful Jedis in that whole order. Not to mention, she's been around Yoda, Plo Koon. I mean,
Oh yeah.
She's received guidance from a lot of really powerful, Jedi, and she's been one to be able to survive the whole Jedi purge in a way. So, and been able to stave off a lot. So,
Well, the thing that's funny about the Screen Rant thing is they recount a lot of the same things, right? She developed her powers, practiced according to Jedi philosophy, even though she did not count herself among their number. She's one of the precious few to survive an encounter with Vader, you know, granted with the help of Ezra Bridger. It continues. So they don't really give like a reason, like a concrete reason, like, okay, here's some of the powers and stuff. But I just can't help but think that when you really analyze her entire career, that I don't know, you almost have to give the nod to her in some ways. You know what I mean? It's like
mhm.
why is she's probably the first person on this list where I'm like, I'm not so sure. Like I can hang with everybody
Yeah,
else, but with her, I'm like, I don't know. I think she should be a little higher. I'm not saying, she should be like number
number
5 or
5 or
something,
anything.
but I definitely think that, maybe more like an 11 or 12 or 13 or something because, I mean, right. Even when you look at it in universe, as you pointed out, I mean, she survived all these eras. I mean, to even survive the Clone Wars with as many battles as she's been in is miraculous, you know? So,
Yeah,
I don't know.
definitely.
All right, well, okay, here's an example. So, I think that Ahsoka's more powerful than Shakti.
I do.
Now, granted,
I do
maybe
too.
because, Shakti was taken down. So, maybe at the time that Shakti existed, maybe that's the reason why they put Shakti above Ahsoka was because during that time. But I mean, if you're giving overall rankings though, I don't know. I'm trying to see what they got
Yeah.
listed for her. You know, she had a reputation for her skill using telekinesis. She can multitask, even in the most heated situations, which is kind of a strange. I mean, I think a lot of people multitask in a lot of these Star Wars
Yeah, it's
battles,
like, what
but
is she, a secretary or
yeah,
administrative
right.
assistant? I mean,
Exactly. It's like, she's really good with PowerPoint and Excel and
you're right.
she can type 120 words a minute. I mean,
That's a minute.
what is this? All right. So most of her adventures are unfortunately non-canon, as is her death. So that means they can bring her back if they want, which they did because this was actually from Tales of the Jedi as well, right? This picture of her.
I'm not entirely sure. I don't
Yeah,
know
I
if
don't
that's
know.
from
I mean,
Tales
obviously it's
or from
animated, but
Clone Wars.
it could be Clone Wars. Reference books have nonetheless confirmed that she died during Order 66. Well, all right, I guess. Hey, look, if they can bring Asajj Ventress back
With hair.
with hair, mind you. But yeah, I mean, I think that that's definitely something, that's worth exploring.
Exploring.
That
Yeah,
you
definitely.
can, and they could come up with more stories for it too. All right, so now we go to another High Republic person. It's nice to see a lot of High Republic love in this thing, by the way. But before we do this, I need to put Ronaldo's comment up. He says Shakti is the Kenny of the Star Wars universe.
You kill Shakti.
Oh man, that's awesome.
Well, if she puts her hood on, she can zip,
Yeah,
tie up
right.
and
She
zip
could
it
just
tight,
zip
and
it
there
and
you go.
tie it. Yeah, absolutely. I'd go for that explanation. All right, number 15. Number 15, we have Solandra Show. And because it's a High Republic person, the name sounds familiar. Let's see. I really wish that they would tell the books and some of the material that some of these characters were featured in. Because I'll tell you something about the High Republic series. When you do read the books, like even right out the gate, like comic issue number 1, the first book that was released, which I think was Light of the Jedi, they're introducing like 20 characters like right out the gate. I remember when we were trying to review the High Republic comic series, and there were just like all these characters that just this glut. There's got to be, I think they said with the High Republic, there's got to be like 70 or 80 characters. And the thing is that depending on the books that you read, it's not like a linear storyline. What it is you have this whole like galaxy-wide thing going, and then they feature different Jedi characters during different times. So, you might be thinking, oh, I'm going to read about the continuing adventures of whomever, and then all of a sudden you're like, who are these people now? And it's because now you have these other groups. So with the High Republic, it's very, very easy if you haven't read a lot of the books or really invested a lot of time into it. It's easy to get confused as far as what's going on. And as far as ranking them would even be difficult because this is the absolute zenith of the Jedi, this time period. And they all had different ways that they were using the Force. It wasn't so dogmatic like under Yoda's whole thing. And Yoda was around during this time. And so I can't wait to find out, why did Yoda find it necessary to streamline the pretty much the creed and the way that the Jedi were going to act from that point forward? Because this is sort of like the Wild West, you had people who, use the Force through song, and you had other people that were, and sometimes you could tap into the dark side of the Force and it wasn't looked down on back then. That's the other thing that was interesting. So with this particular character, she's noted for her perspective on the Force and the ways of the Jedi. She's essentially, it actually says she's essentially the Jedi version of Captain America.
Yeah, I thought that was hilarious.
That's awesome.
She's got a shield.
She's got a shield as well as a lightsaber. Yep.
Like Wonder Woman, more or less.
Oh yeah, she used telekinesis to send the shield spinning around crowds, protecting them from blaster fire. Oh, she's totally the Star Wars Captain America.
Mm-hmm.
That's phenomenal. I mean, I can't actually believe that, I guess that's another laziness thing. Like, I don't know, let's just make one like Captain America. But, but I mean, look, she looks cool, but I'm hoping that maybe we get to see some of these in the Acolyte, or at least more prominently in some of the other material. All right, number 14. Number 14 is Kit Fisto. This is one you always loved. And he's
the guy with the great smile.
He is. He just, like he'll just wreck shop, and then he has this like, Colgate
grin,
toothpaste commercial smile. Like he just ate Mentos or something.
He's like the Joker when he's like, I get a grin again and again.
Let's see.
Well, yeah,
Kit
Fisto was cool, especially when we got the chance to see him in the Clone Wars animated series.
Yes.
Especially like that whole underwater thing, when he was like wiping. That's where you really see him at his best, because he's actually more from an amphibian race and he thrives in the water. So that's right up his alley. So he's, he was kicking butt. But he's also one of the ones who they grabbed to go up against Palpatine too, because he's once again, a phenomenal swordsman. But against Palpatine, yeah, not so much.
Yeah, which is really funny, because if you stop and think about it, you have not only these people who are master swordsmen, but they're also just really powerful in the Force. And yet all of them together just get vanquished immediately, except for, of course, Mace.
Yep.
And then, Mace, which is still to me one of the best lightsaber duels in the entire franchise. I still think it's underrated, but
yeah.
Yay, so you developed a particular aptitude for manipulating water currents, which, by the way, thank goodness for the Clone Wars, because that's really where we started to get a lot of expansion of a lot of these characters that you might see for 2 minutes in the movie or whatever. You can focus on them a little bit more, so that was pretty cool. So he was more powerful underwater. So he's kind of like the Aquaman of the Star Wars universe, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Using like basically propel him through the water like extra fast, like yeah. So like, instead of that force, instead of the force speed that we see Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan use,
yep,
he does it in the water.
Yeah, Yeah, and I mean, I guess, look, some of this is also where they rank because, again, I would argue that Ahsoka is more powerful because a lot of people
Yeah,
would go, well, Plo Koon where he was, Ahsoka where she was. I'm not talking about during the Clone Wars. I'm talking about you fast forward to where Ahsoka is now. I think Ahsoka's more powerful. I think Ahsoka's more powerful than a lot of these Jedi Masters that we passed on the list.
absolutely.
So, that so far though, that's my only bone of contention. I mean, you want to put, you know, um, if you want to put like Kit Fisto above Shakti or whatever, yeah, okay, cool.
I would
Or
agree with
above
that.
some of
Yeah.
these, High Republic characters, okay, no problem. Same thing with number 13. Number 13 is Plo Koon. Okay,
Hmm.
you know,
One of my favorites.
yeah, like Plo Koon. Now, if you're gonna sit here and compare, well, who's more powerful, Kit Fisto or Plo Koon? I don't know. I mean, I guess you can, there have been some, like Plo Koon does come off as one of those, you know, more wizened, seasoned, veteran type Jedi, I guess. Let's see, what are they
Yeah.
basing this on? Yeah, skill and wise Jedi Master who ultimately fell. Yeah, we know that. So he combines telekinesis with swordsmanship. He's a telekinetic savant, even among his fellows. So, all right, fine. You give some of these arguments, no problem. But really, it's like if you're just basing this on what we've seen, and I'm not just talking about in the movies. I mean, look at the Clone Wars, look at all this other stuff. On another day, you might make Fisto number 13 and Plo Koon 14. That's all I'm saying.
Right. I get it.
I just don't
And
know.
but that's what I was saying on the onset, man. It's just like, the measurable, because once again, as we're getting closer to number one, we're at 13 now. Now it's starting to get a little bit more difficult to try to like separate, because now you can say like, all right, yeah, Plo Koon wiped the floor with, maybe Jocasta Nu or something like that. Like, okay, sure, I could see that. But, you know, or Barris Offee, yeah. But, now that we're getting into closer to the top 10, now it's going the gaps are closing in very quickly.
They are, but I'll tell you this. I honestly believe that it gets a little easier with some of the top guys because we just have more demonstration of their powers, their capabilities, things like that, which is something I'll probably bring
Sure.
up once we're in there because we know those characters so intimately that it's easier to judge, okay, this one edges this person out by, a hair or whatever. Whereas, somebody like Plo Koon and Kit Fisto, I don't know. I really don't know.
Mhm.
Because we haven't seen enough of them. We've seen more of them than, some of these High Republic characters or, some of these other ones that have
The
populated the
EU,
list.
yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, not by much though. And
Yeah,
it
Plo
goes
Koon over Kanan, yeah, that's easy.
right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Plo Koon over Kanan, I can sort of hang with that. Ronaldo says, I wish they explored his water abilities, talking about Kid Fisto, like they did in the original Clone Wars cartoon. Well, that's the reason why I think you have to have a Clone Wars animated series, why you have to have Rebels, why you have to have Tales of the Jedi. You do that because you can, for a relatively less money, you can actually get more into these characters. Or same thing with the books, but the animated shows at least is giving you a visual medium. All right. Number 12. Number 12, this is another guy. I have no idea who this guy is. Looks like a Klingon almost to me. It's Porter Engle.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, this is a guy. We do YouTube shorts every day, by the way. We have like these little character blurbs, right? It's almost pretty much like this. You have a picture and there's like a sentence or two. Okay, this is their strongest attribute. This is a brief description every day. If you guys subscribe to us, you probably see them every day. once you get down to somebody like this, it's like, okay. So he's another High Republic guy. Wow, can I buy a vowel? He's the Ikrukian Jedi Master. He's famed for the tremendous feats he had accomplished in his youth, like Al Bundy.
He scored 4 touchdowns in one game.
In a single game. He earned himself the nickname the Blade of Bardota. Or Bardata.
He's like Jack Sparrow.
Exactly. It's like he probably named himself, right? Due to one battle, no less. But his faith in the Force was ultimately shaken, and he wound up living on the Outer Rim as a cook in various temples. So he's like one of those dudes that had like a big career, like he was a lawyer and he became homeless or something.
Well, he's like Steven Seagal in Under Siege.
Porter Engle nevertheless stepped back into action when the need arose. Why is he more powerful than Ahsoka?
Okay.
Or half of these people? Like, now I'm a little bit ticked that he's this high. He should be lower.
Yeah. See, that's why I said I would put Ahsoka at 12.
Yeah, put Ahsoka at 12. Put this guy at, what was Ahsoka, like 17 or something? Do that. Or put him, in the 20s or something. And put some of the other ones a little bit higher. But again, look, I don't know. I obviously haven't read whatever source material this comes from. Maybe if I did, I would change my mind. Kudos for Screenrant for doing this, but who knows? Honestly, the person who wrote this article could have gotten a writing assignment, and they're just like, I don't know who half these people are. I'm just going to look up, StarWars.com or something in their character data bank and just see what I could do. But hey, I have to say that pretty much most of this list, both of us are on board with. Ronaldo says he kind of looks like Hellboy.
I was thinking the same thing, Ronaldo. The same thing. I'm like,
oh man,
dude, he's got the Hellboy horns up there.
He does. This is just. I mean, this is like the craziest thing I've. Okay, let's move on to number.
Villain on a romance like an old pirate romance novel or something.
Yeah, or some exactly. Porter. Who did? Let's start. You know what? I'm gonna move on. Yeah. Number 11 is Grogu. Now this is actually Baby interesting. Yoda. Yeah, exactly. Use the magic hands. But
yeah.
This placement is interesting to me because I don't agree with this. Honestly.
Me either.
Because we haven't seen enough out of him.
Yeah.
It's like, what are you basing this on? He's like number 11. What is this, potential? I mean, it's like my high school counselor telling me that, she thinks, well, you could be one of the best businessmen on the planet or something. So I'm going to put you in my top 10. I mean, that makes about as much sense. We've seen some stuff, but again, Grogu would have to go down. Why is he less or more powerful than Ahsoka?
Exactly. When Ahsoka was trying to teach him.
Exactly.
It's like, really?
And he's not even, he's a Mandalorian now.
Well, and you really, that my argument really doesn't stand up well because, you got Obi-Wan who trained Anakin and, Anakin ended up being more powerful than him, obviously, but still.
Well, yeah, but that's after Anakin actually learned something.
Well, Grogu's been learning, but still at this point though, it's like, Grogu's got a lot to learn before he can just wipe out Ahsoka.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't get it. I'm gonna read why in a second why they put him in there. Ronaldo says Grogu's stronger than Ahsoka. Exactly. Like in what universe? Exactly. Like I can understand if maybe there was some material out there that features him as like a 300 or 400-year-old being, and now you're seeing some stuff from him. But yeah, I mean, for 90% of what we've seen out of him, he has to take a nap after he does one force power. How's that the number 11 most powerful force users? Like Screenrant, what are you doing? You know, I actually tagged them in the well, it's now X, but the old Twitter, in the post that I did to promote this episode. I actually tagged them, so I wonder if they're watching. We're over here like bagging on him or whatever. So he says, still known as Baby Yoda by viewers, he's become more powerful than ever before after being mentored by Luke Skywalker. He's already demonstrated a range of more unusual force powers, including a rare form of force heal that drew on his own life force. One of the most impressive feats to date was seeing The Mandalorian Season 3's finale with the whole force barrier thing. I mean, I guess maybe if you want to... But again, I still think that you're basing this on potential. Because it's like, okay, here's what he's done. So you're theorizing that, you know, in 20, 30, 40 years, he's really going to be powerful. You know, it's like if an 18-year-old kid puts out an amazing album and you're like, oh man, if he's doing this now, imagine what he's going to be like when he's like 30 or 40. It's like, well,
Yeah.
what if he's peaking now? You know?
Yeah.
You really have no guarantee that he's going to progress.
Yeah, like a lot of athletes, you know.
Right. Let's see. Ronaldo says, I guess he became stronger when he became a Blazer 15 Knight in Season 3. You know, who knows, man? That was one that was just mystifying to me. So there's been a couple. But I have to say, I mean, look, there's 30 entries on this list. And so far, there's only been a couple that we're questioning, really. All right, so number 10. Number 10 is Var Chris. This is one that I would probably say, okay, I might even personally put her a little higher. You know, not much, but a little. I mean, she's somebody that I've actually seen quite a bit of. And she's pretty powerful. I mean, again, it's a High Republic character. Let's see what they say. She was the one that perceived the Force as a song. She could perceive the presence of other Jedi as part of the song. And so she can harmonize the power of the Jedi. Because what she would do in a lot of these books, when they would face a greater threat or whatever, she would actually unite all the Jedi in this like Force song, combine their powers, and then, you know, they would vanquish whomever they were trying to fight.
Okay, so essentially she's a Taylor Swift of the Jedi. Great.
Let's see. So, yeah, on one occasion, she drew the power of all Jedi across the galaxy together to move a massive chunk of debris away from a stellar collision. So, see, if she wanted to say, I am all the Jedi, I could get on board with that. But,
right.
you know, but again, and this is where we're in the top 10, and this is where we could start making some arguments, like you said. Because there's going to be some where it's like, well, of course this person's more powerful. There's going to be others where we're like, I don't know. So Ronaldo says, and this is kind of where I'm at too. No issue with this one. She's very powerful, and she is. If you read the High Republic comics, not only is she really powerful, but she's actually one of my favorite High Republic characters. There's like a calmness about her, but yet she's compassionate. She's calm, but without being stoic. And I think that that's a really important distinction, because that's usually you get a lot of stoicism when you get people who are kind of relaxed and calm and everything else, and, you know, all one with the Force and all that. I mean, she still has some emotion, and she can get angry, she can get worried or whatever, but she also exhibits that I have everything under control thing going. So I'm into that. But yes, she is very powerful. But here's the thing. Number 9 is Qui-Gon. I would put Avar Kriss above Qui-Gon without hesitation. Without any hesitation. She is so much more powerful than Qui-Gon. I don't see, other than popularity, maybe you can argue that, you know, we have more on Qui-Gon. But No
The only
way.
thing I can, the only thing that I think that where Qui Gon edges out is that he's the one who's the first one to become a Force ghost, and I think that's just because of his knowledge of the Force. I think that's where Qui Gon, because he's the one who believed in the prophecy, which Dooku was talking to him about. He's the one who believed in the whole chosen one. The So he was kind of a Force seer in a way, and he was trying to tell Obi-Wan that at the same time in Attack of the Clones, um, when he was just like, be mindful of the future, but not at the expense of the moment, but be mindful of the future. And I think that's where Qui-Gon was headed. He was also trying to tell the council about a lot of stuff, like, hey, there's a Sith left there. And they're like, I don't know, like, dude, I'm a Jedi master. I think I know a Sith Lord when I see one. It's kind of like,
Well, yeah, that
and I
wasn't
think,
really perception. He actually fought him. That's how he knew. It's like, well,
well,
I ran
yeah,
into
but
one.
that's what I'm saying though. It's like, okay, but the fact that one, he's a powerful swordsman, um, and the thing is that also, like I said, I think he was pretty powerful in the Force. As when you read books and things like that.
Yeah.
Um, I just think that with him being able to keep his consciousness in the Force, that's what edges him out against Avar.
I don't
Because
know.
without him, we don't get Obi-Wan, we don't get any of it without
Yeah,
him.
but that's kind of like, all right, you're in the Super Bowl. You're like some guy that, maybe barely has any plays and you just happen to make the touchdown that wins the game. You could say, okay, now suddenly that's the best or most important player or something. But is it really? No. Because when you look at
No,
talent, look, you want to sit there and go, okay, if we're talking about most perceptive Jedi or you know, Jedi that comes up with the most important new powers or something. I mean, you could say, there's a transcendence thing there. I can hang on to that a little bit, maybe with the whole Force Ghost thing. But again, and this is the problem that I have with people making these lists, is the fact that when you actually read the material that's out there, and this goes back to something that you said at the beginning of the show. What was the criteria?
true.
What we needed, like some sort of a guide of how did you
Yeah,
rank these people?
what's your
Because
rubric? Yeah,
yeah, exactly. Because my whole thing is like, okay, in what universe, if you actually read, other than the Star Wars universe, if you
yeah.
read basically the books of the Var and it's like it just doesn't add up really. So it would be interesting to see, well, okay, if we know the criteria upon which they're basing this, it's like, oh, well, maybe you could do that. And maybe that was it. Maybe they're saying, look, he comes up with something that like no Jedi has ever known before. Now, I would argue that that doesn't necessarily make him the most powerful. Maybe that makes him the most knowledgeable, but
But
power to
knowledge is
me,
power.
well, you did not just go after school special on me right now. All right, so Ronaldo's got a couple of comments. He says, I think both Avar and Ahsoka are stronger. I could see that argument. Here's the problem with that. Avar, yes. Ahsoka, possibly. Possibly. But the problem is, it's kind of like you said, the books. You have to factor those in. And even in the books, there's not a whole lot with Qui-Gon. It's not a whole lot. There's some, but not a lot. But that would be an interesting matchup, actually. Ronaldo also says if this was a list of the wisest Jedi, might be top 5. Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, Qui-Gon's.
Okay? So, for those who think that Ahsoka could beat, are you saying Ahsoka's more powerful in the sense of? Because I don't think she could beat Qui Gon in a sword fight.
That's tough to say.
Because no reason
I
why
mean,
I'm
if you
saying this
really
is
want to, I mean, really, if you want to go by, and this is arguments you love to bring up a lot, where because
uh,
look at Qui-Gon versus Darth Maul, and then go rewatch that Clone Wars duel between Ahsoka and Darth Maul.
yeah, but and I would agree to that only if you put Ahsoka's in her, I don't want to say her prime, but she's young enough to be able to do that. You have to remember, like, the Jedi hadn't encountered Sith Lords until, like, until that happened. I mean, Maul was the first one to pop up out of nowhere. And that's exactly what he did. He legitimately, like, literally popped up and just started dueling them in the middle of the sand as they're running. He could sense them, and he was just like, okay, there's a dark force coming. We need to get out of here. But he didn't know. And then Maul just attacks him. He escapes one. And quite frankly, I mean, he was pretty much doing well against Maul for the most part. But remember, Qui-Gon's older at this point. He hasn't had a whole lot of lightsaber dueling with someone of the dark side. And Maul is significantly younger. So
Well, but
I can
again,
kind of see that.
but see, here's the problem with that argument. Because if that's the case, then Yoda shouldn't be as, shall we say, sprightly.
Yoda's a grandmaster. That's different. That's now you're talking about power level at that point.
Well, but still, now he's a Jedi Master. You look at a lot of other Jedi Masters. I mean, a lot of the other Jedi Masters, that's the problem I always had with that whole, he's supposed to be the best swordsman in the galaxy. From everything that I've seen, everything that I've read in the novels and comics, not seeing it. I think he was an above average Jedi Master. I definitely think that he was, he's definitely very wise. But
I think he was. I think in his prime, yeah. But I think once again, like, I'm just looking at the context in which things happen. You're talking about someone who's probably in his 50s, early 50s. They haven't seen a Sith Lord in a millennia. By that time, and then you gotta think about it. By the time the Clone Wars, okay, yeah, they're all sharpening their skills now because they're at war now. So of course everybody's up their game, but this is like the onset of everything. The war hasn't even started yet officially. This is just the very beginning of all this stuff unraveling. So
but
Qui-Gon is
again,
kind of having to take this as it comes.
but that's power. I mean,
What do you
that
mean?
made Ahsoka more powerful because she has more battle experience than Qui-Gon did. Ergo,
Because
if Ahsoka,
because she's had no
like, look, take
that
Ahsoka from like the Mandalorian era, put her up against Qui-Gon because she's like 40 something in the Mandalorian, so she's close to
yeah
Qui-Gon's age. I'm not talking
yeah.
about like teenage age. I mean, I get it because I did bring up the Darth Maul thing, but take Ahsoka from that era, and
Talking about the Mandalorian era. Okay,
you
so
could
you're saying
say,
because, but yeah, once again though, it's like yeah, it's not the fact that she's more powerful, it's just that she's had more practice. That's not doesn't necessarily denote power. That's just like saying Michael Jordan is still not the greatest basketball player. If he played against one of these young guys, of course he'll probably lose. He hasn't done this in like 20 years. But if you catch
well,
if
all
Jordan
right,
had time to actually
okay.
get in his
So
prime or get in shape.
here's what I would say then. Then
Mhm,
what we would need in order to properly rank that, if you're gonna make that argument, then we need to see
mhm.
what Qui-Gon was doing when he was 25 or 30.
It's kicking butt and taking names.
But we don't know that. And I mean, quite
Yeah,
honestly, it's like, I
we've
mean,
got books that
well,
that have
actually, there is Master and Apprentice.
mhm.
That
And
was
let's not
one.
forget that his master is one of the most formidable swordsmen, being Count Dooku.
Well, Ahsoka's master is the chosen one, the great Anakin
Exactly.
Skywalker, who would totally
Of
mop
course.
the floor with Qui-Gon.
Of course, because he's the chosen one. Of
Well,
course
but
he
if you're gonna
will.
make the argument about
But
like
we're
the
not
whole
talking about him
master
against
thing,
Anakin. What I'm saying is, I'm saying if you're comparing Anakin, you can't compare Anakin's power to Ahsoka and give Ahsoka Anakin's power. He can give her the techniques, but she doesn't have the power of Anakin. the thing is that that Qui-Gon has is that he's actually had the skill set to actually combat someone. He's just gotten too old and he was too out of practice at that point. But I'm telling you, if you put Ahsoka, like you said, if you put Ahsoka at the Mandalorian age, and you put Qui-Gon in his prime,
well, now you had the flip side of the argument that you made before, because you were saying you can't compare the Darth Maul thing because that's Ahsoka young, Qui-Gon old. So now you're saying you want to put Ahsoka old, Qui-Gon young. So what you'd have to do is
not necessarily young, just saying prime. Like,
well, prime
not necessarily in the 20s. I'm talking about like, okay.
Well, I don't even think that Mandalorian Ahsoka is really at her prime necessarily.
Yeah, prime Ahsoka is probably,
I'd say
maybe
like
Rebels.
Maybe, yeah. That's what I was going to say
Maybe
too.
Rebels?
I think Rebels probably, because she's aged enough to have that wisdom, but she still has enough, like youth on her side or whatever.
She's spry enough, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
Because I think Rebels. Although how long before The Mandalorian was Rebels though? Because Rebels is like probably around. It's up there in episode 3, like around Rogue One-ish. A little bit before or something. Oh yeah, didn't they say it was something like 3 years before Rogue One or whatever? I remember Filoni made the comment once.
Yeah, something right there.
So I mean, she's probably maybe late 30s then.
And that's what I'm saying. Like, that's what I mean by younger. Like, not necessarily young, like Ahsoka in the Clone Wars, but like if you put Qui-Gon, like I said, 35. You put Ahsoka and Qui-Gon at 35. I think Qui-Gon will still beat her.
Maybe. I mean, it really just depends. Because
that's a fun little debate.
It is. But that's the example, though, of where I think that this list. I mean, with the Avar versus Qui-Gon, there's just absolutely no question. Avar Kriss is way, way more powerful. I mean, she's close. She's close to Yoda, actually. I mean,
I could stand that because especially them being at the zenith of their power too. So I can rock with that.
Yeah, the Ahsoka versus Qui-Gon though. That's where, now you have to start playing with time. That's where the analysis begins, and that's why it would really be fun to see what was it that they're basing all this stuff on. Because I wonder if they would even go as deep as we do. Like, are they going and saying, well, Master and Apprentice Qui-Gon versus... I mean, do they really do that, or are they kind of going, well, all right, she's sort of, but, Qui-Gon's older and wiser, we'll just pencil him in. It would just be an interesting thing to see how they did that. All right, number 8. Now here's another thing then. I mean, if you're gonna make this impassioned argument about Ahsoka versus Qui-Gon, then I can't wait to see what you say when they're basically saying that Cal Kestis is more powerful than Qui-Gon. Well, let me see what they. So he has he has a range of unusual force powers, and again, I played Fallen Order a little bit. I know a little bit about the character. I'm not intimately familiar with him. I'm probably more familiar with Cal than a casual fan, but I haven't played the games enough to really delve into it. So he has psychometry, the ability to sense the past when he touches an object, animal empathy. His power levels have grown over the course of the games, helped by his tendency of drawing attention to himself, which means he constantly has to push his powers to the limit so he can survive. I guess there's motivation. He flourished throughout the dark times, refusing to operate in the shadows. So they're not really too forthcoming about why. And that's another problem that I have with these little blurbs that they have underneath their rankings. Yeah. It's like,
More
okay, if
talking
you
about
could,
who they are versus why they're powerful.
yeah, it's like, I mean, they sometimes they brush against, well, let's say, okay, well, this person could do this, this, or this. It's like, okay, yeah, but why are they like, why is this guy number 8, though? Like, what makes him 8 and Qui-Gon 9 then? Why are
Mhm.
you putting him above Qui-Gon? I'm not 100% sure I would agree with that either. I would almost flip-flop these guys, maybe. And then why is
Yeah,
he that high? I mean, why is Ahsoka that low?
exactly. Exactly.
That's
No, I mean, 'cause I think Ahsoka could wipe the floor with this guy.
completely. I mean,
That's what I'm
Ahsoka,
saying.
I think Ahsoka is really underrated because I think a lot of times she lives in the shadow of Anakin. And I also think that a
Mhm.
lot of people haven't explored like all the material that we have about Ahsoka. That I think a lot of times she just gets underrated in a lot of ways. Ronaldo says, he beat the game. He's powerful, but there's no way he's number 8. And that was what I was saying too when I first saw this list. I'm like, 8 seems kind of high for him.
Yeah, I
I
agree.
mean, no disrespect to the character. He's definitely powerful. I know enough about him to know that. But number 8. Number 8 seems excessive. Okay, number 7. Number 7 is, of course, Mace. I
No
think it's a
way.
little low.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
I think that's
Absolutely.
low. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
high?
Yeah, that's just,
Jesus.
I
Like, come on
mean,
now, people.
I
The guy
just
is second to Yoda. Are you
yeah.
serious?
Yeah. Yeah, honestly, May should probably be in like top 3, top 4, at
Yeah,
least top 5. I just
yeah.
don't understand this at all. Why would you put Mace? Like you said, he was second only to Yoda. He's super powerful. I mean, if look at, he went up against Palpatine and survived. He pretty much almost won. Um,
Mhm.
there's just so much there when you look at a lot of the novels, and I'm curious to read that Mace Windu novel's out, isn't it?
Yes, it should be. Yeah, I believe so.
That Glass, or what's it called? Glass something. Um,
Yeah.
oh man, I can't remember, but I think it is out. This is what
What is it
happens
called?
when
Shatterpoint. Is it
oh,
the book
maybe
Shatterpoint?
that is. What's I
I think it's
thinking of?
Shatterpoint because that's one of his force abilities.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're right. I think you're right. That would be a cool book to actually get and check out.
Mhm. Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
now one that we're all going to get mad at. Number 6, Ray. You
See?
are
No.
you are
See?
putting
No.
yeah, you are
No.
putting
No.
Ray
No.
above Mace. That is just
No. That's
criminal.
blasphemy.
It
That's
is.
blasphemy.
That's just
See?
completely
No, 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 no. Uh-uh. I'm not buying it. I don't care
no.
what she claims her last name is. No.
Now I'm going to put it out there right now. Screenrant's racist. That's like the only reason. I mean, come on, man. Really?
Oh,
I mean,
please.
granted, I mean, I think a lot of what they're basing the whole Ray thing on is if you just go by the in-universe nonsense, um, the problem is that they're gonna go by the fact that she's almost like a force prodigy, that she learned all this stuff without anybody teaching her, because even Luke had Obi-Wan and Yoda. Um, they're gonna go by the fact that she's the granddaughter of Palpatine. They're gonna basically say those kinds of things. But she's still inexperienced. She still has like almost zero lightsaber skills, really.
None whatsoever. She can barely control her abilities, quite
Right.
frankly. Even in the Rise of Skywalker, she
Yeah,
blew up a whole transport that she thought that had Chewbacca in it because she couldn't control the powers. I
exactly.
mean, really? And then you want to tell me she's better than Mace Windu?
Yeah.
You're high. On
Yeah.
top of that, it's not like she beat Palpatine on her own. It took like 30 other Jedi in her head to kind of help her do that.
Including Mace, by the way.
Including Mace, by the way. Exactly. When Mace did it all by himself, he didn't
Mhm.
have some special connection to Yoda to make him more powerful. No,
No, he
no.
wasn't
Shut
chanting "I
up.
am all the Jedi," and
Yeah,
and plus, don't
exactly.
forget, she had the dyad with Ben. Ben's the
That's
one
what I'm
that
saying.
came to
Like
her aid, and
that's what I'm saying. She'd have some special connection with
nope,
Yoda to do that. Like
nope,
she just
yep.
he was just that good. Yeah,
He was
please.
just that good. Yeah, it's
Get me out
just
of here.
it's so stupid. What is this? All right,
Right.
so Ronaldo says he, meaning Mace, needs to be number 5 at least, and even that's low. Then he was kind of like, "Hey,
Exactly.
Ray is cool."
She's cool, but no.
Well,
Sorry,
no,
Ronaldo.
no, no, no. That's why I had to put this up there. It's like, just
Oh, okay.
kidding. No way she's 6.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no way.
that's the thing. It's like, look, I don't have a problem with Ray maybe being in the top 20. I could live with that.
Let me ask you this question. Now, here's the real one. Is
We're
she
not gonna
better than
fight again,
Ahsoka?
are we?
I don't know. We might.
Oh, oh
Lightsaber
boy.
on guard.
All
Is
right,
she better
all
than
right.
Ahsoka?
Whew.
You know what? That
I
should be. We'll say that for another show. We'll do some investigation and we'll do some thorough research and we'll make that another show.
Yeah, that's like a good.
That's a good one,
That
though.
probably is a good one because yeah. All right, fine. We'll
Because
make it another
that
show.
likens back to the early days of our show when we had
Oh
like
yeah, like Duel of the Fates. Yep.
Duel of the Fates. Yep.
Well, speaking of which, at number 5, we have Ben Solo.
Ugh, once again, no, not better than Mace.
No, not better than Mace. I mean, granted, he is
Please.
the, well, where are we at now? Great grandson of the Force.
Yes.
And, he's powerful, no doubt. I
Yeah.
do think Mace is more powerful.
Yeah.
I mean,
I would say
I
so.
wouldn't have a problem if Mace were 1 point higher than Ben, because I think that Ben Solo, he's another one, because when you look at how powerful he was as Kylo, granted, they can't say Kylo because it's like a dark side, it's a Sith Lord thing. But, even as Ben, he has the light side of the Force. I mean, you have to read all the other stuff, though, to really get a true sense of his power. But I don't know. I think 5 still might be a little high for him, too.
I can
I
see him at
just,
7.
yeah, 7 or 8. Like, I don't have a problem with him being in the top 10, but I think it should be lower in the top 10. Like a 7, 8,
Yeah.
somewhere in there. And of course, Ronaldo got a lot to say about these people now. Ben is powerful, but he's not 5. Yeah, exactly.
He's
That's
no
what
5.
he's no 5. Nope. All right. So at number 4, we have Obi-Wan. So now we're gonna start to get to the people that
Now we're getting to the nitty gritty.
we're getting to the nitty gritty, and it's like ranking these people is gonna be a little tougher in some respects, but a lot easier in other respects. I could
Yeah.
probably hang with this, actually.
I can hang with Obi-Wan being 4.
Yeah, I
Absolutely.
can hang with him being 4 because
I have no qualms about that.
he's another one of those guys where he's overrated by his fans and underrated by everybody else. You know,
Mhm.
um, he's definitely somebody who's very, very powerful, but he also likes to play it a little safe. And as we saw with the Palpatine, well, first the Dooku duel, and then the Palpatine duel when Anakin was fighting with him against those opponents, he's dispatched in like minutes.
Yeah. Um Obi-Wan is once again one of my favorite characters. I love him.
Mm-hmm.
I think but when it comes to power, yeah, I think he's more wise than he is powerful, in my opinion. Um if you want to talk about like Ronaldo said, if you want to talk about wisdom, yeah, I would put him in my top 5. Um
But he is a pretty good. You know what? Another
don't get me wrong,
matchup that would
he's
be
a
good
formidable
is
he's
Obi-Wan
formidable
versus Qui-Gon.
yeah, I mean that would be cool. Master against apprentice.
Because
I
that would be one of those ones that you would probably have to research it,
yeah.
because I can
I th-
see scenarios both ways.
Sure. I think it would be just edged out by a point if you wanted to do it that way. But
Yeah.
I think because see the thing about Obi-Wan, what makes Obi-Wan good is that he's more of a strategist. He's
Yep.
more calm. He's more calculating. He's not impulsive. He's more of like, okay, how many ways can I beat you versus let me just beat you? It's like he wants to think about all the different possibilities I have to beat you. So I mean, but he's also, like I said, we've seen him do some things, especially in the Kenobi series. The fact that he was able to shut himself off from the Force and then gain it and get that back, and then become really powerful, where he's kicking the crap out of Vader. At the
Well, and
last
that was
tail
one of
end
the
of that.
things. The thing, not only did he survive 2 duels with Vader, but he was actually triumphant, in one of them. So,
Hmm.
and again, obviously, you have to look at the time period that A New Hope was made and all that stuff, but he basically gave up his battle to Vader in A New Hope. It
Right.
wasn't like Vader beat him.
Right.
So, there is that. Ronaldo says people overlook how powerful he is. He defeated Grievous, Maul twice, and Vader twice. And yeah, these are things that can't really be overlooked. And I think that is the tendency that a lot of people have. All right, number 3, of course, we have Anakin. I mean,
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Um, of course, we all know, like, if he would have stayed on the light side of things, he probably would have been, the most powerful of all, because
probably,
he's
yeah.
the son. He's the direct son of the Force.
Well,
So
and Lucas
yeah,
said that basically in one of the
yeah,
commentaries. So, can't
yeah.
you're not gonna argue with the
Can they
creator, right?
exactly? So, but because he didn't, and also just at the time, the thing about with Anakin is that um he couldn't always access all of his power because of the fact he let his passions cloud his judgment a lot of times.
Mhm.
And that was his stopping point. That's what would kind of freeze him in certain places where he should be able to overcome it very easily. It's just because he couldn't get out of his own way.
Yeah,
Um
exactly.
and that was, Anakin's thing. But I mean, surely when we saw early on, that Anakin was a formidable fighter. He loved the combat. He loved getting into the fray. Um, and he was so reckless, but he knew what he was so confident in his abilities in himself and in the Force that he was just like, oh yeah, I got this. you know. Um,
Yeah, he's a complex character because of that,
yeah, very.
you know? Like, he's one of those guys where sometimes he would be very measured, very calm, even wise, especially in his dealings with
Hmm.
Ahsoka, because now he's the teacher, he's the master. So he
Right.
has to now take on that role.
Pull
But
back
then
sometimes. Yeah.
right, but then there's other times where it's the complete opposite and he's completely reckless and Obi-Wan has to try to rein him in. So there is that
Hmm.
duality to him, which of course ultimately that becomes the Anakin Vader thing.
Yeah.
All right. So number 2, I mean, look, there's only 2 left. It's not really a surprise. Maybe it's a surprise on where they fall. I don't know. Number 2 is Yoda.
Yoda, you seek Yoda.
Yeah, Yoda, I mean, obviously is going to be. Hey, we could even technically say it's another High Republic character.
Yeah. Well, he's
But
almost all Republic character at this
yeah,
point,
yeah,
except for Old Republic.
yeah.
But um, yeah, Master Yoda, man. I mean, what else really needs to be said? I mean, we've seen just the monumental things he's been able to do, from dueling Dooku, flipping all over the place, to battling, Palpatine, flipping all over the place, sending, pods back at him, absorbing some of the most powerful force lightning there is, um, being able to sense the clones attack before it even happens. He was a step ahead of them for once. Uh, Showing Luke that, even at his old age, he can still like lift a X-wing up, out of a swamp and fly it across that same swamp and land it. I mean, the guy is just ridiculously powerful, ridiculously wise. Um, his, you know, lightsaber skills are unmatched. I mean, he's really a hard one to try to contain. I mean, he's literally like the quintessential almost Jedi.
And in retrospect, I keep thinking because they didn't really have a lot of EU characters in this countdown. There's no Kip Duran, who's like really, really powerful. He definitely would have made pretty high on the list. But yeah, one of the things that they say in the Screen Rant article about Yoda is the fact that, of course, he's had centuries to learn the Force, and that's
Hmm.
one of the reasons why he's so powerful. Now, Ronaldo says, I wonder, is Yoda stronger than Mace? Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Like,
Oh yes.
there's not even there's
It's
just
not even close.
not even close. It's like, yeah, you could say that during the time period they live in, Mace is number 2, but that's like a far two. There's like a big gap between
Yeah.
Mace's power and Yoda's power. It wouldn't even there. It wouldn't even. It's not even worth discussing. That's how much it is.
Yeah. Exactly.
However, somebody that could give Yoda a run for his money, perhaps even best him later in life, is Luke Skywalker.
Yeah. This is the one. I struggle with this one between the one and the two because I don't know if, like you
I
said
don't.
earlier, Eric, you said earlier that on one day it could be Yoda, and the next day it could be Luke, and I feel that in some ways I can still see that. I just think, I mean, of course, we know Luke to be extremely powerful, and of course, when you read the EU, he's godlike at that point. So if you're not taking that into consideration because that's not canon, and if you're just strictly sticking to the canon stuff that we know, which is kind of what I'm doing, although I like the concept of him being almost godlike. I mean, I think he should be. Um,
Yeah, being
and
that
I,
he's
and
a
I think
grandson of the Force and all.
absolutely being the grandson of the Force, and then you've been trained by one of the greatest grandmasters of the Force there is. Yeah, you should be practically a god at that point, and I wish they would have done it because for two reasons. One, I think it's deserving. I think it also is one of those moments where, like Yoda said, you want to see your students surpass you. And we all know, like we just said, how wide of a gap Yoda is from Mace. How much more is Luke above Yoda now? And but that would be the ultimate compliment to Yoda to see, like, man, like I put someone beyond me.
Hmm.
And I never thought I would ever be able to see that, or witness someone who's actually at my level or better than me.
Yeah, that's true
So
because if you actually think about it, Yoda's gone through pretty much his whole life without seeing
being better than
anybody
everybody.
being really close, even.
Yeah,
Where now,
exactly.
you get Luke and it's like, oh, wow, this guy, not only is he close, he's as good, he may even be better. And
Hmm.
I'm partially responsible for that.
Hmm.
Ronaldo basically says, no discussion for me here. I think he's the best Force user ever. Well, the interesting thing about that, because that's like it's a, it's a good segue, actually, because that's pretty much what Monday's show is going to be about.
Yes,
So
sir.
we're basically taking these top two, right? Because of course you can, and you've seen, we were talking about Ahsoka and Qui Gon, and then maybe like Qui Gon and uh Obi Wan. It's like it took me a second.
Hmm.
I'm like, wait a minute, who else do we compare him to? Some of these other matchups. You can actually take a few of these characters from the list and go, well, wait a second. Why is this person at this ranking and this person's at that one? And you can go on, right? But the big question, though, becomes, yeah, should this be flip flop? Or is it correctly weighted, and why? And so what we wanted to do is we wanted to.
Hmm.
This is sort of like the prequel, if you will, to Monday's show. We wanted to get this list out there and done and say, okay, now that we've seen these 30 most powerful Jedi according to Screenrant, let's take the number 1 and 2 because that's the most interesting. And now break that down on Monday. So we're going to take Monday's show and we're going to break down basically why Luke is number 1 and Yoda is number 2. Maybe we talk about, should that even be the case? There's a lot that we can really get into, and we didn't really want to do it because, obviously, look, this is, there are like 30 people on this list. This has become at this point pretty much a 2-hour show where we usually average about an hour. So, I mean, there is true. We used to do 3.5 hour shows, but that's when we had multiple segments, So we thought, okay, let's just put this list out there and then let's take these top 2 and break them down. And of course, I'll put a poll up to see which one you guys think is the most powerful out of these 2. Ronaldo basically says, let me get this in here real quick. He says, shouldn't Revan be on this? He's known as a Sith, but he became a Jedi later in the novels. He did, and Revan is canon now and that was where I think the holdup was. So, yeah, I don't know why he wasn't on the list, actually, because it's pretty well known. The only thing I can think of is maybe they're not sure. They have Revan canonized through The Rise of Skywalker, but they haven't really given any details. It's almost like the character's canon, but his story isn't yet. Right. I think they're still working on that. And that might be something from, like what's that James Mangold thing, The Dawn of the Jedi or something like that? Dawn of Jedi. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, maybe we'll see something there. So I don't know. Like I said, there's a lot of EU people that aren't in there. There's, I'm sure probably some canonized people in there too. I mean, there's, like I said, there's like a gazillion High Republic people. I mean, this whole list could have been populated with them. So it would be interesting to see what the criteria that Screenrant was using. I would have liked to have seen that. But just shy of that, it's like, look, we can only discuss what we're given. And so that was Screenrant's list. And obviously, we went through the 30 that they put down, and now Monday we're going to continue the discussion where we get in a little bit deeper with the Yoda versus Luke discussion. So you guys aren't going to want to miss that. All right, we got through it. That was
got through it.
That was quite a list.
It's a mouthful.
That was a mouthful. I was sitting there the whole time like, 30. All right. But yeah, so I mean, like I said, like and subscribe to the channel. If you guys want to see more content like this, hit the notification bell so you know when we're posting. Because again, we do some YouTube shorts. We got other irons in the fire, so to speak. So you don't want to check that out. And of course, join us live Monday night at 8 when we break down the Luke and Yoda characters and their power in the Force and who's actually more powerful. All right, so with that, I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.